Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. Today, my guest is Adam Wolfe. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks, Clayton. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. I wanted to ask you, you were born in Texas or born in Ohio?
Ohio. Yeah, born in Ohio, Akron, a little suburb of Akron. I did my undergrad in Ohio at Cleveland State. And then I moved to Texas, 2006. Yeah, 2006, I moved to Texas.
Hmm.
I was there. I did my master's at Rice. I was down there doing my master's. I was there until 2011 when I moved up here.
So
Just past
you
10 years.
you were in Akron. Were you a big fan of LeBron and them?
Totally, of course. Actually, so I went to a private like private Christian school, parochial school, thing. He went to St. Vincent St. Mary, which was like a sibling school in sort of the same kind of league, except their athletics were so much better than my school, so we never played them, you
Mm.
know. But I mean, yeah, we everybody knew about him because he's pretty much our age, like my age. We're very similar in age. I think he's like a year or two younger than me. So we were juniors and seniors in high school hearing about him already, and the Cavs are like wanting to like draft him and like whatever. It was crazy, you know.
Did he start out on the Cavs? I can't remember. Did he? I
I
think he
think he
did.
did. I think he was like a really early draft pick, right? He was I mean, I don't remember if he I have to remember now. I know he didn't do college. But yeah, I mean he
Oh, that's right.
like every
He went from
Mhm.
Cleveland to Miami to
Yeah, and then back to
Cleveland.
Cleveland. Yep. Then to LA. But yeah,
LA.
yeah, everybody knew about him at that time. It was like he really was like sort of the chosen son, like way
Mm.
early. It was very cool. Really cool to watch what he did there.
Do you play sports too?
Do I?
Yeah.
No, no. I was the band geek for sure.
So what was you grew up in, you said in Akron, right?
I grew up in a suburb of Akron called Talmadge, like a
Okay.
little town. Yeah.
What was your first musical memory?
First musical memory, man. Actually, I have a pretty clear one. So I started taking lessons. Like, so I went to these like kind of smaller schools. There wasn't like huge music programs. The schools that I went to, but my mom signed me up for lessons at a little mom and pop music store in Kent, Ohio, like kind of a neighboring town called Woodsy's Music, which I think might still be there. And I was so fortunate. My teacher was a UNT grad. So this is literally like mom just like found a music store, went in, said, "Hey, I want to, son wants to do drum lessons. Like, what? Do you have a teacher?" Sure. Got a guy. His name was Rich Maslock. He was a UNT grad.
So
Um,
for those who don't know, what's UNT?
University of North Texas. So super like elite, crazy jazz program. I think I'm not a jazz guy, so I don't know. But I was very fortunate to get someone who was just really good at what he did, and he was good enough to send me on I think a pretty good path as a little beginner, because you never know what you're going to get in one of those like little mom and pop shops somewhere. You just never know what level of instruction you're going to get. I think lessons were like 725 a half hour or
Wow.
something. It was crazy. It was something like that. Um, but yeah, what we say yes, we did that first musical memory. I took lessons with him for like a year, and then I joined like the eighth grade band or something, seventh or eighth grade band in my middle school. And one of my first lessons was just playing that like concert B flat scale, playing the snare drum with the band, and having it all of a sudden, having never played music with anyone else before live, playing like along with, CDs and stuff or whatever at the time. Then all of a sudden playing live with people. This was, of course, like a group of, like 30, 40 kids or whatever, playing this huge sound. It was like it was really cool. I think my first real musical memory is that.
Did you have musical parents?
Yeah, somewhat. My dad played drums. He passed away when I was young, so I never got to see him play. But my first drum set was his drum set. It was like an old Rogers kit. No idea what happened to it.
Mm.
It's long gone at this point. And my mom writes songs. I don't know if she really like reads music, but she writes down like lyrics and chords and stuff. And for a long time, like did kind of songwriting. I think is kind of a like creative outlet, you know.
Do you think it was their influence that made you say, I want to play drums?
No, I remember very clearly what it was. I had a couple friends again in like fifth, sixth grade, and one of them started playing guitar, and one of them started playing bass. So that kind of left drums. As far as that kind of thing goes. I had been in like the fifth grade band. I started on clarinet, and I was like pretty good at clarinet. So they moved me to trombone because we had nothing low in the band, which is not remotely the same thing. And I think that's where I learned that I have very little like natural intonation, because the trombone is just a giant tuning slide. Like you have to use your ear to make that sound come out the right way. The clarinet felt like a video game, like press these 3 keys and the G comes out. You know what I mean? That's what it felt like to me. It was sort of, you can kind of like do the right thing and the right sound comes out. I'm sure it was never, 5th grade, your intonation's pretty wide at that point. But, when I moved over to a brass instrument, it was like, oh no, this is way not right at all. Yeah. Then it was on the drums.
When was the last time you played clarinet?
Oh man, like probably 5th grade, honestly. It's been a long time.
Somebody put a clarinet in front of your face right now and said, I want you to play Giant Steps. Would you be like,
be like, no, that's not going to happen.
Oh man. So what were some of your influences back then? I mean, you wanted to play drums. Did you like have people that you looked up to as far as drummers? Other than, I guess you didn't really get to know your father that well, but were there other drummers in town that you looked up to?
Yeah, I was good enough to get to I was lucky enough, I should say, excuse me, to get to hear my teacher Rich play a few times with his band. He was, I think, is probably typical, like in a kind of smaller area like Ohio. He was like a semi-pro guy. Like he had kids and he worked at there was some sort of like a glass factory job or something, but he had a couple groups he would play with. So I got to hear his jazz group play a few times, which is really cool. Through that, I actually met a bass player who I wound up playing with at his church periodically throughout like high school and college, like really good bass player named Sam. I'm trying to remember his last name. It's escaping me right now. He passed away a couple years ago, but he was one of the musicians who I also like got to know a little bit. And he was kind enough to just be so generous, like playing with, I was like, 15 years old playing at this like really big church, kind of in that, like, I guess you'd call it now kind of like a Nashville, contemporary Christian style. You know what I mean? It wasn't gospel. It was the other version that kind of resembles country, kind of resembled rock at the time, It was that kind of thing. So that was really cool. As far as the drumming influences and stuff, I was really into another friend of mine asked me to do a podcast a couple of years ago when I was doing Bandstand. And that was where I realized I've always been into music that's kind of like a narrative music. I just didn't know it literally until like 2 years ago. I had no idea. And then I was thinking back as he was asking me similar questions. And I was like, oh yeah, those first like few songs I like wanted to learn on drums. One of them was like Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, Billy Joel, which you were just talking about with Joe, exactly. I think, right? Joe Bergamini.
I still don't know how to play right. But anyway.
I loved that. Like, the first time I heard that song, I loved like all the different sections to it and how they kind of like put them together was super cool. But also I loved that like the song had this like plot to it. It was like a TV show or a movie or something, in this song. So that was a song that I learned. And another song I brought to Rich that I wanted to learn was that I don't remember which one it was. It was off No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom record, like their big that came out like 94, 96, something like that, 96, 98 maybe. And that also had a couple songs on it that were like these really big like narrative, with like multiple sections, kind of songs. So I was really into stuff like that. And I had no idea that was even going back to like my earliest, again, you're asking about musical memories. My earliest ones were like these kind of large scale narrative-esque things,
American Pie by Don McLean.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that would that count in that category? That's not really.
I suppose I'm not like I'm trying to remember like the whole like arc of the song. I suppose it's not something I'm like as deeply familiar with. I remember the very first song I ever learned. This wasn't a narrative song, but that song "Shine" by Collective Soul. You remember that song?
Kinda. Yeah,
it was like it was real popular. Like this, they're kind of like I guess like Southern rock. They're still out there doing stuff. But that song was the first song I ever learned on drums. I wrote down the entire thing, like transcribed it. I think it was just a produced part. It's kind of an unusual, kind of unnatural part. I think it might have been a produced part on the record, but I was super into that song too.
So No Doubt, Collective Soul is this the mid?
That was like mid 90s, yeah, like mid late 90s. The Collective Soul, the what's the guy's name? Shane Evans is the drummer in Collective Soul. Their self-titled album, which came out in again around that same time, like 97, 98. I played that and I could play that entire record front to back at like 14, 15. Now I wasn't playing it as good as him, I'm sure, but was like very simple, like rock patterns and just really great like sounds. I remember being enamored early on, even at that age, with like every track had like a different snare drum sound. And kick drums probably too. And even now I go back and listen to them and it's like, oh man, all these sounds are just, they're so killing and they're so of that era, like these kind of real cracky, snappy, and roomy, snare drum sounds that are kind of that like 90s vibe. And I go back and listen to them like, oh, I just love it. It's like my favorite sounds, like still,
You're gonna make me go back and check this out. Collective Soul, the first album, the self-titled one, 1995. Right?
The first one was Hints, Allegations, and Things Left Unsaid. That was the one with Shine, and then the self-titled one came out a couple years later. I remember that was like it was this funny, like if you bought it early, it was a blue like liner, and they sold it in a yellow case, so it looked green. It was this crazy, like I remember this very clearly.
Shine, Good Night, Good Guy, Wasting Time, Sister Don't Cry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any. I gotta go back to listen to this.
Yeah, Gel was a really popular one off that, or Where the River, December. That was probably the biggest single off that record. It was kind of a ballady, acoustic guitar driven thing. Or The World I Know. That's one that winds up in movies and stuff sometimes, or did for a while, I think. That's a great record. It's great. I love that album.
Did you have bands in high school that were in the vein of these kind of groups that you liked?
Not really. I wound up playing in a punk band when I was like 16, 17. Yeah. It was a Christian punk band. We were called the God Squad.
What? Really?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Christian punk. I've never
there was a Christian punk scene in Northeast Ohio. And the band that came out of it, that you might actually know, I don't know, it was a band called Reliant K. Named after the car, this crappy Chrysler car.
Yes, I remember that car. Wow.
Yeah.
K car.
Yeah. There's the K car. Yeah, it was a band called Reliant K who was in that little scene with us. So we would open for them pretty often, which is pretty fun.
Wow.
That was like before they were like that. Now I think they're like Nashville based and they're like on a big Christian label and they've been a big band for like 20 years or something now. They've been a big band for a long time.
God, you're like opening up my whole mind to a whole different thing. That's very cool, man.
My favorite thing, I was talking to who was I telling about this? I think I was telling Daniel Glass about this, but remember like the neo swing thing that popped up again, like late 90s. Okay, there was a Christian one called the W's. There was a Christian like neo swing band who I saw in concert once. It was really fun, and they had a song called "The Devil Is Bad" or something. Like "You Are the Devil and You Are Bad" was their big single, which is hilarious.
Wow. So what does a Christian punk band, are they angry? They get up there and they 1, 2, 3, 4. And they
that was the vibe. Really? That was the vibe. It wasn't like, I don't know if it was like angry. I don't know what it was. I can't remember what any of the songs were. Ours were like on the poppier side of things, maybe more like analogous to like something like a Good Charlotte maybe or something of the time. I don't know. It was on the punkier poppier side or whatever that would be.
I remember there was a band in the 80s from Japan that was a Christian heavy metal band. I can't remember their names. They had the long hair and they throw Bibles out in the the audience, man. I think at a Christian punk show that maybe they should throw the Bibles at people.
Yeah, just whip it at you from across the room. Yeah. Hilarious.
Oh man. So
I was doing that. And I was playing in churches a lot, actually. Like you asked me if I was from Talmadge. You asked me where I was from. Talmadge, when I grew up there, was known as being, it was like literally in the game of Trivial Pursuit as being the town with the most churches per capita.
Wow.
Like in the country or something. It may still be for all I know, but there were like churches on like every corner, like every kind of, little offshoot denomination branch, whatever you could think of, was out there somewhere. So, and that was true of a lot of Northeast Ohio, I think then. So I was playing in a lot of churches. I was playing in my own home church. I was playing at one of the bigger, like non-denominational type churches as well, in their special music stuff and that kind of thing. I was very lucky. I got to play with a lot of musicians who were a lot older than me, a lot more seasoned than me, which I think was helpful, for my development.
A few years ago, I was playing in this church. It's I don't know if it's offshoot of Grace Church, but it was called Grace Church. And I never knew about the thing called worship music. Because they were like, okay, learn these songs, this by Hillsong and
right, totally, yeah, Chris Tomlin,
yes, and And then after I started learning, it's like these songs are actually cool. So it's like rock
Yeah.
music, but it's this Christian music, and
Hmm.
it's unfortunate that it's like there's worship music, then there's gospel music. It's still like kind of a segregated thing.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it's all the same thing. They're spreading the gospel. But
Hmm.
it was just fascinating to learn a whole subset of gospel music. I don't know if it's a subset. It's just a separate
Right.
genre.
Yeah,
Did
it's
you ever?
almost, you're right. It's almost like a subset of like, it's like rock and country. And now a lot of it's gone very poppy, like all kind of like, but with this religious bend to it. But it's like, it's very similar to like a lot of, I think it's all like just very Nashville sounding to me, you know?
Mm, it was a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, for sure.
Good
Those are
stuff.
like really like, they're like currently, I remember like last time I was doing that, it's all like really big washy cymbals. Like it's
Yes.
really like your ride cymbal just needs to have no articulation, just all, and, the
Just
whole
like an
time.
Alex Van Halen style,
Yeah, totally. Just like washing everything out.
Yes.
Super fun. Yeah,
So you went from playing in those kind of situations that you eventually go to college for music, and why did you do that?
I did. Yeah, great question. So I was also at the time when I was like in high school, I was playing in I was unusual. I didn't know that stuff like the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Orchestra like existed. Like I just didn't have anyone point me toward that way. But I had been taking like percussion lessons starting in middle school. So I had like a teacher who was like I came to him and I think I wanted to learn like hand drums or something when I was like this is like 14, 15. And he was like, "Well, you know how to play marimba, don't you?" And I'm like, what's that?" I had no idea. Um, he's like, your scales and your music theory and all that. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, like at all, any of this stuff. So he was like, well, I want to teach you that first before he was a grad student at Kent State at the time. His name was N. Scott Robinson. He now teaches percussion. I want to say, I think he's back at Towson. No, he's in San Diego now. He's at a school in San Diego. He's like a pupil of Glenn Velez. He's a very like crazy, frame drumming, hand drumming guy. Super awesome musician. So he got me on kind of the percussion set. So I stopped kind of taking drum set lessons really and started taking these like classical percussion lessons. And then, but I also still play drum set like in churches and stuff. So when the time came for college decisions, the question was, well, do I want to go to like a Berkeley kind of situation, or do I want to go to a like a classical school? And I think my more conservative side won out. And I was like, well, I want to get a job in an orchestra because that's like you get to be in like one city and you get to like, you can kind of like build up maybe like more of a life or something, without like having to be like on the road all the time. And like it seems like it's so disruptive. So that was the decision I made, was to go to, I actually started at Ohio State University. I was there for about a year and a half, and then I left and finished my degree at Cleveland State, which is a much better fit for me. Ohio State at the time to me felt like it was a lot of, I call it percussion for percussion's sake. Like all you're doing is learning like marimba solos and percussion ensemble. And, it's all this like very percussion stuff. It didn't feel as focused on like the playing music with other people, other instruments or singers. So Cleveland State was very like orchestrally focused. That's where Tom Freer was teaching at the time. It was very like heavy, like kind of audition heavy program, like learn your excerpts, take auditions, win jobs. Like that was kind of the thing. So I did my undergrad there. And that was why I thought that I was going to go like be an orchestra guy. And then after that, I went to Rice, which was like an inverse in a way, because it was like really good collegiate orchestra, like super awesome collegiate orchestra. So that was a chance for me to kind of like actually get to play in a really good ensemble, like all the time, and continue like learning and taking auditions and stuff. So I was down there, but everywhere I went, I was always kind of known as the drum set guy, because I could look at a chart and I could play grooves and I could interpret what's on a chart. It didn't have to be written down for me. And my orchestral training kind of gave me that ability to understand how to like read conductors, which on Broadway is a, it's a specific thing. The way you have to do it in a symphony is very different, obviously. But like you kind of learn how to like what you need to pay attention to, the things you should ignore a little bit, depending on the situation and whatever, so they kind of, all of that just sort of gave me this like really, I wasn't trying to find it, but I feel like I kind of like lucked into like a skill set that works really well in theater. And it was very not deliberate for a long time. It was just sort of coincidental.
So studying classical percussion,
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to a couple of people that actually did that, and again, it's a whole other thing that I'm learning more about as far as
Hmm.
auditioning for symphony orchestras and the preparation that you have to do to audition. Were you
Hmm.
doing that as well?
I was, yeah. When I was at Rice, I really wanted to be a timpanist. So I actually took out a loan and like bought a set of timpani from one of the guys in the Houston Symphony when he was sort of cross grading his timpani. So he had really good pro drums and he was just going to a different kind of really good pro drum. So I bought his old drums from him and basically just like rented those effectively. Like when you think about the finances of it, it was basically like I rented them for like 3 years. And then I sold them to UT, University of Texas at Austin, needed a set of timpani. So when I left town, I sold my timpani to them. Um, but yeah, I thought I was going to be a timpani player. And you're right about the audition preparation. That was a thing where I got out of school. And so I didn't really have access to practice as much there anymore as I wanted to, but I did find a good situation. One of the churches where I knew the music director had a little bit of extra space. So he let me keep some timpani there and I could actually practice on my drums, pretty like fairly routinely, which was cool. But I was in the position where I had to take every private lesson. I had to teach every private lesson that I possibly could, take every gig that I possibly could to pay for the drums and pay rent and, pay everything else. So I wound up with like not enough time to really do the audition thing. And then you realize a lot of the people that you're up against in these auditions, they're students and they're practicing this stuff like 8 hours a day. They're just going through and they're every audition they're getting ready for and they're playing it like just tons, like tons and tons and tons. Their only job is to practice for like this audition and stuff. And so it for me, it became like I was realizing like this isn't going to work out for me long term. You know, if my financial situation had been different, like maybe it would have, or if I'd been able to like stay in school longer or something, maybe I could have gone back and done more of it. But it just became one of those things where I'm like, I don't think this is going to work out for me like super long term. And I still, to this day, I still get pretty nervous during auditions. Like audition situations are still pretty nerve wracking. I always dealt with that, just as far as like the playing and coming out the right way. And it's so many new things, and especially for timpani and percussion auditions, you're often you're playing on like it's the first time you're seeing that xylophone is like at the audition or whatever. You know what I mean? Now you might be lucky, like Cleveland State, had like a stable of instruments that were the staples you would find in most orchestras. So if you knew the orchestra had the Deegan 872, you could practice on the school's Deegan 872, but it's still different. It's not exactly the same, you know? But that was a really hard thing for me to get used to and stuff. Being in New York cured me of that a lot because like, you're never bringing your own gear to stuff half the time. It's always like the club drums and the whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You're lucky to be bringing your cymbals, maybe a snare drum. Working in New York cured me of the need to like have my stuff all the time. It's like, no, are the drums there? Great. I'm using those. No question.
It's so funny. I'm going off on a little tangent here, but recently I started teaching a couple of young people, and they were talking. I was asking them about, how do you get your drums to these venues in New York City? He's like, I don't bring my drums around. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what? Because when I came here in '93. I dragged my drums to every gig, CB's
Yeah.
Gallery or CBGB's or wherever. You had to bring even the bitter
Oh,
end.
wow. Oh, wow. Really? Man.
Yeah, you have to bring it. Everyone brought their drum set. You put it, you walk in and it's on
Oh,
the
okay.
right hand
Yeah.
side.
Okay.
There's drums ready to go on and drums ready to come off, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just as a cluster. But anyway,
Crazy.
nowadays all these places have backline. I'm like, man,
Yeah.
see, I paved the way
Oh,
for you.
man.
No,
Yeah, man.
but yeah, it's so much easier now. You could just go in and play and leave, and almost
Mm-hmm.
like Broadway.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah.
you decided to get your master's degree from Rice, and
Mm-hmm.
your focus after graduation was on the symphonic path. You wanted to be in a symphony orchestra.
Yeah. I was trying to win a job as a timpanist. So I took a few auditions. That was the other thing too. It was so expensive too. Because like every time, you want to take an audition, you got to fly to like whatever city the orchestra's in, assuming it's, not drivable. Probably pay for a hotel, lose a couple days of work. By the time you like total it all up, it's like, man, you're losing like, some serious money, on the whole thing. It's always a debit to the things. So you really had to get far ahead when you could get ahead in order to afford to take the auditions. So what happened for me was, as far as like kind of how it got me into theater was my teacher at Rice was one of the big contractors in town. He didn't contract much theater. He contracted the opera. He contracted the sort of freelance classical world. He had like a big band, kind of a function, band, wedding band type thing that he did, which he was a member. It was his band. But he recommended me for a couple theater gigs. And that was kind of how I figured out that I was actually good at it. I had only done one theater gig really when I was in Ohio, and I was a sub on the show Love Janice at the Hannah Theater, which was like not the same Janis Joplin show that came into Broadway a couple years ago with Mary Bridget Davies. She did actually do this show. She was like the second Janice actually at that production. So I've actually met her there. She's from Cleveland. So I met her there. And this is a crazy connection. The woman who played Janice at the show was Katrina Chester, Gary Chester's daughter. Yeah, like she's actually like she's named in the back of the New Breed. But she has a little bit about like Gary's legacy and stuff. So it was really cool to meet her too. That was amazing. But she was super sweet. So that was my first ever subbing gig. Was that my first ever theater gig, I think, ever, apart from like playing the show at my high school or something. And so then in Houston, I just sort of like I got a couple theater gigs through the grapevine, and then I started just getting more and more of them. And all of a sudden, it was like my calendar was full of theater gigs all the time, because again, I think I had inadvertently or kind of unknowingly stumbled into like the right skill set for this thing. And also, we were talking about the musical theater, drum and percussion book on a group on Facebook. There was a lot of that thing where it's like, cool, we're only hiring one of you, but there's two books. Can you combine these things? And like, I can actually play the mallet instruments and I can play timpani, and, so I could combine those things as much as, as possible too at times, but I could make those other instruments work, alongside the drum set and stuff. So yeah, I wound up getting a lot of theater work that way, that was kind of what started me on that. And then the way I got here was there, like I said, my teacher in Houston was a contractor, but he didn't do a lot of theater. He had one theater where he contracted for. It's called the Alley Theater in Houston, Texas. It's an exact physical copy of the Schubert Theater here in New York City, but in Houston. That's why it's called the Alley, like the Schubert Alley.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like a literal, I guess I'm told the backstage and everything, like the facility of it is it's like identical to the Schubert. So you can do stuff there as like an out of town and then bring it here and it works I guess is kind of the idea. So there was a musical that was coming through there called Wonderland by Frank Wildhorn that was doing an out of town tryout in Houston. This was like January 2010 or something. And he called me up and said, hey, I have this gig coming in. I think you might be a good fit for it. Do you want the music supervisor wants to talk to whoever the drummer is going to be. Do you want to talk to him? So sure, of course, obviously you say yes, so I said yes and talked to the music supervisor, and he kind of walked me through like what the book is and kind of what it was about. I was like, yeah, this sounds great. And the idea was it was a whole bunch of different styles and kind of a big hybrid book of like, there's drums and some percussion and whatever. Like, this is right up my alley. So I did the show there, and, long story short, they asked me to come play it on Broadway when it came in the next year. It came in spring 2011. So that was how I got here. Was I actually moved here with a Broadway show, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm. And how long did that last?
All of 4 weeks, 28 performances. Yeah, a little bit of a flop, as they say. We had like 4 weeks of previews and 4 weeks of shows, and that was it. So yeah, it was a bummer. That was a bummer for everybody, obviously.
So did you kind of feel that was going to happen, or
I had no idea. I didn't know what the signs were of stuff like that. You know what I mean? When they came to me and when they came to us and we're like, hey, we have some tickets to give away. Like, give them to your friends. It was like, oh, that's great. I can give tickets to my friends. So you just went, oh no, that's the appropriate reaction. You've been around Broadway for like, oh no, you're giving away tickets. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Like that's the reaction. I was like, oh, this is great. I can give them to my, that friend who I went to high school with, who later became my wife, is how that like went. She was here in the city and we went to high school together. I gave her tickets for the show. We reconnected there and then started dating about a year later.
It's a good thing they came out of it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Huge good thing for sure.
Words of wisdom: when your show starts giving away tickets, it's not a good sign.
Yeah. Not a good thing. Not a good thing at all. So, but that was my thing that got me here. And it was from that show that Bill Lanham played percussion on that show. our dear mutual friend. I love Bill, and Bill was the first guy to let me sub for him on Broadway, on EVITA. So that was like my connection from that show. And Bill, that's all, like everything's just gone out, very organically from that.
It's fascinating how certain people have one person that connects them into the whole scene, and then it
Mhm.
expands. Like you said, for me,
Yeah,
it was Matt Beck, a guitar player,
sure.
who got me into the whole scene. But
Nice.
yeah, uh, so you were at Evita. I subbed there as well,
I
and
know. Yeah, we both did. Yeah.
it was the first time having playing that type of show,
Hmm.
because it wasn't necessarily in my wheelhouse. And I admired Bill from seeing him at Les Mis and knowing
Hmm.
he's done all kinds of stuff like that. And he asked me to do it. I'm like, oh my god, it's a little scary, especially doing a song like "And the Money Kept Rolling In." I'm like, oh
Yeah.
shit. But that didn't last very long either, though. I mean, I can't remember how long it lasted, but I guess when I started learning it, as soon
Mm.
as I got it, it was like they had 6 weeks left, and I was like,
Oh,
oh
bummer.
yeah.
That's too bad.
But you subbed there, and you
Hmm.
I guess Jeff Potter got your name too. You subbed at Rent as well.
I subbed it. Actually subbed at the off Broadway Rent for Carter. So that was
Oh,
actually my
okay.
first. That was actually before Evita. I started subbing there a little before then. That was super cool. I had, that was my first ever New York City subbing thing, was subbing on that book for Carter.
Yeah, I forgot.
Um,
Rent closed in 2008, so this is
yeah.
2012, I guess.
Yes, the
2011.
2000. I think you're right. I think 2012, 2011 might have been like late 11, whatever it was when that reopened. But yeah, like Carter was kind enough to have me in there, and um, got to meet him and got to know a couple of the other folks in that band and stuff. And it was great.
So
He's such a killer.
how'd you connect with Carter McLean?
That was literally like just a cold call. I think I had heard, I think if memory serves, like Wonderland had closed, and I had heard that there was, but like there's this Rent show opening. They're going to reopen Rent. And I was like, I knew that because I played the show in Houston. I knew the score already. So I was trying to figure out if there was any way I could get, considered for it. And obviously, like I was just too new. I wasn't considered for it. But I think I found out that Carter was doing it, and I just wrote to him and said, hey, like I've done the show before. I already kind of know the score, and I moved here with a show and it closed. So I'm like super free. I'm like, could practice it 20 hours a day if you want, whatever I got to do to get in. And eventually he was kind enough to just let me come in and play the show for him. Which is cool. It was really, really informative because I got to learn. That's a long score. I don't know if you've played that show. It's a
Mm-hmm.
long show. There's a lot of music in that show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I got to dial in my whole, like, I got to talk to people about how you sub and what do you do, and transcribed the entire book of him playing the show. And that was not one of those ones where like it was, there's a lot of slashes in that one, so you're writing in all kinds of stuff. And he's a very capable player, as we all know. So there was I learned a lot of really cool vocabulary from that, and like stuff I still use all the time in my everyday, bag of tricks that I can try to pull out, try to pull off. Nowhere near as well as he does, but
So
I do what I can.
after Wonderland closed in the 4 weeks, were you like, you know what, I got to go back, or were you like, I'm here now, I'm going to make things happen?
That's a great question. So what was crazy was, I'm trying to remember when we closed. It was like May 15 or something, or they announced the closing on May 15. I had literally just given away my like good private teaching gig in Houston that I had prior to leaving the city. I'd gotten into this really wealthy private school in the Woodlands, Texas, which is a very, very wealthy community. And it was a great situation. They had some good gear. I could borrow like any gear I wanted, like anytime. They were basically kind of letting me. It was a big school. It was like, I think it might be literally like K through 12. It was a huge school. It was at least like third grade or something through high school. So they were kind of letting me like design my own program, which was amazing. I was getting to like start like the fifth grade students the way I wanted to, and like design the curriculum kind of like with them. And I had just started that fall. So when I moved, that was like fall 2010, I guess. And so then when I moved to the city in spring 2011, they came to the band director was a friend of mine, and there came the point where they kind of had to hire someone. He kind of needed to know, like, are you going to come back next year or not? Because I had said, like, yeah, I don't know. Who knows how long this thing's going to go? Like, I have no idea. and I was as about as well established as one, could be in Houston, being my age and being just what the scene is down there. So I kind of knew what I was going to be doing. So yeah, I chose to stay because I also kind of had this feeling like if I go back to Houston, I'm going to be doing the same thing in like 10 years. Like it's a smaller scene, than a place like New York, of course, which is, to be expected. And it's kind of got the people who are in the top like echelons of it. And, it was going to be a long time before any of that was going to turn over, at that time. So I knew I'm going to be doing the same stuff in 10 years. I'll be doing the same sort of like regional, gig, local gig kind of thing. That's what I'm going to be doing. And it had been hard to do. So I was like, yeah, let's take the shot. At the time, I think I was like 28, 27, 28. Wasn't married, didn't have kids. I was generally unencumbered, as they would say, so yeah, I kind of took the shot and was just sort of like, I think I'm just going to stay and see what I can do. I think some people like thought that was a little crazy, and it's certainly like what was never easy. I remember like Wonderland closed, like I said, on something like May 15th or 27th or something like that. I didn't play a single gig until like September or something, like August. Not a single thing like came in. It was also a weird time. Like it was kind of an odd time. It was still like the city was still kind of recovering from the recession, the Great Recession. It was still sort of in the middle of that. I remember that was the year Book of Mormon opened. So Sean was kind enough to let me come watch him play the show a few times. And I met like Matt Vanderend and like the guys who were on like the long running shows. But I remember going to ibdb.com, where you can look up the personnel on shows and stuff. There was like 17 shows total or something running at that time. It was not very many. When it was like the big ones, it was like Lion King and Phantom and Chicago and, these shows that have been around for kind of like, forever. Yeah. And now there's like, that was like a third of the theaters were occupied or something. It was crazy. It was a really like slow time overall for Broadway. So it was real hard to find subbing. Like anybody who had a show was really hanging on to it,
At that time, I was very fortunate to be working at Memphis the Musical.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
At the Schubert Theater.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool.
In Schubert Alley. And people were like, man, it's rough out here. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to, go back out there again because, man, this money is great. It's a steady gig. But 2012 came along and the show closed and I was unemployed again. But I was fortunate to, have that show from when did we open? 2009 to 2012.
That's great.
It was I guess somewhat of a long run, but yeah, it was a weird time. And I remember every January or so, you get the list of shows that would close, and it'd be like, oh my God, there's so many people out of work. But things rebounded.
Yeah.
But there's this up and downs of theater, but it's the thing you kind of have to expect. So I was, I bring that up because I guess the orchestral route, if you get into an orchestra, are you do you have like tenure? Is it something that if you get a job at a symphony orchestra, do you have that job for life? Like, how does that work? As opposed to Broadway, yes, it's your gig, but shows don't last very long generally.
Yeah, generally speaking, I'm not very much in the orchestral world anymore. I didn't really pursue it when I got here, but yeah, generally speaking, the big orchestras are like, they're called like full-time orchestras or like, full season orchestras. They might be like, you're salaried and it's a full 50, 52 weeks a year, kind of thing typically. And yeah, you do get tenure after a certain period. I think it's usually like a couple of years or something, or end of your first season or something. They'll do a little review thing typically, and you either sort of like get your job or not, and then that's it. You're in there, and it's similar to it's like every orchestra is like a Broadway show, except you're correct. It goes on like forever, like season to season. And of course, like I said earlier, I went toward the orchestra route because I thought that was going to be like more secure. And then as I got out of college and started seeing what was going on, it's like, oh my gosh, orchestras are failing left and right. Like, like not like the way Broadway shows do, but so many orchestras like in the recession were closing. They were like disbanding and they couldn't deal, or they were going from being full-time 50-week seasons to being, we're going to do a 26-week season and we're not going to give you health insurance anymore. And we're going to, we fiscally, we can't do it anymore. So we got to squeeze it all back down, So just, it was clear that like music is a hard road to go. I think no matter which direction you decide to go in it, it's definitely a thing that's, it's tough to make a real career out of it. but yeah, so it's definitely, it is a different thing in that sense though. If you win an orchestra job, like if you're in the New York Phil, or you're in, even like, smaller groups, even like a lot of like I don't know what the right term would be, but like the smaller towns have like full on, 50-week full-time orchestras, you know, cities that would be like kind of mid-major or whatever that sports term is, not New York, LA, but those kind of mid-sized cities, even most of those cities have a full-time orchestra, that it's a full-time gig, and it's got benefits and that AFM pension and all that stuff.
Mm, fascinating.
Yeah.
So you left that kind of you got off of that path and you wound up getting your Wonderland gig, and then that
Mm-hmm.
closed and you started subbing for Carter.
Mm-hmm.
Then you went to EVITA,
Yeah.
got to Matilda,
Mm-hmm.
AVE Q, Cats.
Yep.
What did you do to network and meet other musicians that are doing Broadway shows?
It's a great question. I actually really, I open your that email you send out every time about the networking tips. I open it and reread it every single time. I know it's gone out a few times over the past few months, and I read it every time because I don't feel like I'm that good at networking, to be honest. Um, I've been very fortunate, to get to work as much as I have. I do the thing. I always try to connect with drummers. I'll try to be specific with it for drummers. Like, I love hearing everybody play their shows. It's super fascinating and so informative, and it's so interesting when you're in New York and you're lucky enough, when it was pre-COVID, to be able to just go sit in a pit with someone. And we're so lucky as drummers, because as drummers and percussionists, we often are kind of given a lot of our own space in the pit, and it's kind of our own little world. And if we want to have someone sit with us, that's no problem. There isn't the second drummer next to us who's annoyed there's another person there or something, or there's not enough room. So it was just so fascinating to see just how like fantastic everybody is, and how different everybody is, and how unique everybody's playing is, how they approach certain things, the way that every orchestra is such its own little like little mini like organism, and they all function like their own way. It might be a like fully headphones, in ears, click tracks situation. It might be none of that. It might be like one little hotspot monitor so you can hear that person who's like 30 feet away from you. And other than that, it's like fully acoustic, and it's very orchestral in that sense. And everything in between, and it was so cool to get to do that. So I would always try to email people and just say, hey, I'd love to come watch you play your show. I would never say, hey, I want to sub for you, like right off the bat. That was never like the thing. I would always try to like I just want to hear you and meet you and see your thing. I'm kind of new in town, whatever. And I would do that. And I always just found that like super rewarding. And then, you talk to people and you do what we're doing now. You talk about your influences, you talk about your background. These are typical conversations, I think, that like drummers and musicians have with each other. And, so you kind of have those answers ready. And then if it turns out it's a good fit, maybe it's a good fit, and you get to work with someone, And I also had the advantage of, advantage/disadvantage, kind of a double-edged thing. When I was here after Wonderland closed, I had nothing else going on. Like I said, I didn't work for like, it was 3 or 4 months. I didn't do a single gig. I was just like on unemployment or something. So when I did get that shot, I had so much time to practice the stuff. You're talking about subbing EVITA. Like EVITA was my first Broadway subbing thing. I bet I practiced that at least 3 hours a day, all the time. And Bill was very kind and gave me a lot of time to like do it. I probably spent at least 6 weeks doing that or something. I was so ready for that first show. It was the whole score was practically memorized at that point. You know what I mean? I was just staring the conductor down, just like, I'm right with you. Here we go. I was just like right there, man. So I was lucky to have that kind of time available to do that. Like the longer you're here, the busier you get, the less you have that luxury, So I think it was fortunate for me that I had that time, and I could make those first few impressions that were good, So I think that really helped. That helped. Like, I think word travels fast in this town a lot. You know what I mean? Like good and bad at times. So, I mean, if you do your first couple things well, I think it starts to snowball, So it's important to, when you get that opportunity, I think if you can, to really take the time and do it as well as you can, which obviously we all do it as well as we can. But, I was very fortunate that I had that time to do that.
AVE Q, Cats, Hello
Mm-hmm.
Dolly, Anastasia, the Prom.
Mm-hmm.
Then Bandstand. Tell me
Yeah.
about how you got Bandstand.
Yeah, Bandstand was so fun.
And that that
I
was that was your show.
That was my show. That was my last Broadway show. That was the 2017 season. So Bandstand, this actually goes all the way back to Wonderland. The music director for Wonderland when it was in Houston was this guy named Greg Anthony, who's now he goes by Greg Anthony Rassin, I think professionally now. So I met Greg in Houston doing that show, and we just sort of became friends. My first real gig after Wonderland closed was he was living in Boston, I think at the time. And he came down to do a way off Broadway in New Jersey show that was kind of eyeing its way into Broadway. And asked me if I wanted to do that run. And I was like, sure, like, absolutely. So that was like, a lot of travel and hard run, far away when I was living in Queens at the time, and I had to travel to New Jersey every day, to play a show for $100 or whatever it was, some crazy amount of money. That was difficult, but obviously a great opportunity. So he and I reconnected there, and then we're just always sort of around. I don't think he was living in New York full time, but then eventually he did come back, and he just called me up one day, and it was kind of a last second thing. Bandstand was doing a run at Paper Mill out in New Jersey, which is a great regional theater house in Millburn, New Jersey, outside the city. And they've become kind of a testing ground for a lot of stuff that's kind of Broadway bound. I remember like they won the special Tony in like 2018 or something for being best regional house. And like the next season, it was, of their 6 shows, 5 of them were new musicals. It was like they were really playing that up. So they were doing a fall run of Bandstand at Paper Mill, and he called me. It was like late July or maybe even into August, and it was kind of a last second thing. Like rehearsals were starting really soon, and I think the drummer they had been talking to about doing it just couldn't make it work for whatever reason. Something just didn't work, and so they brought me in, and I had to learn the score like in a couple days and come in and kind of like play through it and see if it was going to work. And it was the kind of thing where there wasn't a drum book yet. It was just here's a piano vocal score. So it's like just sort of learn these tunes, go with this, try that, and so that was how I got that. Was I think Greg just knew me and was correct that I was probably available, and so super grateful that he continues to call me. Continues to send stuff my way. So that was how I got that one, which is through Greg. So that goes all the way back to like my first like pre-New York, connection with sort of the New York theater world. Because I should explain, sorry, when they did Wonderland in Houston, they sent the music director and the associate and like a lot of the design team, like the sound designer and the lighting designer and choreographer were all New York people. But the orchestra, the rest of the orchestra was local to Houston. So, but I got to meet some New York people, and that sort of established some of those connections and stuff. And then because he didn't actually do the show on Broadway, he was doing other stuff, but because of that, we knew some of the same people. And so again, it was just all those connections. And when people ask about you, they can ask someone they already know, and they can get an opinion, and the way your reputation kind of gets around there and stuff like that. So that was kind of how all that went.
So Bandstand was at Paper Mill Playhouse.
It was, yeah, that was, it was either 15 or 16, I think. It was a minute because it was fall. I think it was fall 15. So like later into 15, we closed probably in like November, December, 2015.
Well, it went to
that one.
It went to Broadway in 2017.
Yeah, it went to Broadway in 2017. Yeah.
Okay. 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Did it run very long?
About 6 months. It wasn't super long. We opened in April and ran into September, I think. And because of like, how it is when you're the drummer, you're in rehearsal. So I started working in like February or something. Mm-hmm. So I got a nice, like, totally decent run out of it. But yeah, it didn't, I'm trying to think what we did. We won the Tony for choreography. It was Andy Blankenbuehler who choreographed Hamilton. He was our director choreographer. So won the Tony for choreography, and we were nominated for orchestration, which was super cool. But didn't win that one.
I heard a few tracks from it, man. You're
Hmm?
fucking swinging on that, man.
Oh, you're
I was
very
like,
kind. Thank you.
damn, this guy can fucking play. Because
You're very kind.
I knew you from the scene, and we kind of crossed paths, even
Hmm.
literally crossing paths in Midtown. I was like, hey man,
All
what's
the
going on?
time.
How you doing?
Yeah. Totally, all the time. I love that one time I was walking down 8th Avenue and you were like walking behind me, sort of next to me, like, oh, excuse me, sir. You were kind of like trying to get my attention, kind of
Oh
messing
yeah.
with me. And I was like, oh, that was so funny. It was
Sometimes
great.
I do that to people, like, hey man, can I
Yeah.
borrow some money, please?
Yeah.
I'm like, get the fuck out of here, dude.
And it's like, oh,
But
it's you. Oh, it's you.
now I'll be like, please, can I borrow some money?
Oh,
Just kidding.
gotcha.
I saw somebody again. I saw some one of the people from Ain't Too Proud, and he was
Yeah,
on
yeah.
his way to a workshop. And at the time, right now, I'm doing a workshop, and
Cool.
he was going someplace, and I was going another place, and we connected. He's like, "Oh, so what are you doing now?" I said, well, and I kind of like joking with people about this. I say, "Yeah, I'm about to go get into my Elmo costume and go to 42nd Street and do my breakdancing routine." He's like,
Uh-huh.
"Man, if I ever see you do that, I'm putting it on Instagram."
Uh-huh. Nice.
But yeah. So anyway, Bandstand.
Hmm.
Uh, did you get a chance to play on the Tony Awards with that? Was it nominated for Best Musical?
We did, yeah. We got to do our Act Two opener, which was really fun, really cool number called a Nobody, like kind of a shuffly, almost Brian Setzer orchestra like type thing. That was my rockabilly, kind of almost like a rockabilly thing. The show was supposed to be set in like the kind of post World War II 1940s swing vibe, but it's still fantasaical thing. So we were not limited to only that particular style. But yeah, we got to go into the recording studio and record that like for the Tonys. I got to play on it, which was really cool. Warren, that was one of the years Warren was doing the Tonys, so I got to like go in and see Warren and real quick swap out some cymbals and like put my snare drum up and like do this thing and in and out in like 15 minutes, like super fast. Or maybe like an hour or something. Because we also had to record like the little bumper music they use when they're announcing you or whatever, if you win or whatever. So yeah, it was super cool, really cool experience to get to do that too. It was really fun.
Forgot about that. I did that with Ain't Too Proud
Yeah.
last time.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, you just go in and you just play and you leave. It's a
Yeah.
fascinating experience.
That whole big orchestra in front of you, and
yes,
yeah, it's like
exactly.
because I remember we had a pretty big orchestra at Bandstand. We were 13 in the pit, which was bigger than the minimum for our theater. I think our minimum was like 9 or something. So they actually went like a good bit over. And the whole like the plot of Bandstand revolves around a guy who comes back from the war and like starts a swing band and it is writing music and being creative to kind of deal with his what we now know, of course, is like PTSD. So there's a band of actors on stage. There was actually like a drummer and a bass player, and the lead guy was playing piano, and there's a couple of horn players like on stage as well. So there was a total of 19 strong at certain points in the show, which is really fun.
Maybe that's why you guys closed, because it was too expensive.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, too many musicians.
That's I guess a whole other podcast as far as
that is a whole other one for sure. Definitely.
the business of Broadway. I'm sure there's somebody that does that already. But anyway, you went on after that to do Jerry Springer the opera.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tell me about that. How'd you get connected with that one?
That one was Greg again. That's Greg Anthony. Greg did the charts for that, and he wrote me like just the most ridiculous book. It was so crazy, man. I will send you some pictures so you can put them up with the podcast or whatever. It was like drum set, 3 timpani, Grand Casa orchestral bass drum, vibraphone, bells, chimes. I think I had crotales too. I think there was an octave of crotales. Some hand drums, electronic pad. It was like everything in the kitchen sink, like just so much stuff. It was such a crazy fun book, really hard. That we had like a 6 or 8 week run, and I couldn't sub it out. It was an off-Broadway show, and it was so hard. Like definitely the hardest thing I've ever played for sure, by a long shot. Rewarding, but just really difficult. And everybody's book was like that. We only had 4 musicians, and it was like 2 keyboard books who were crazy busy and 1 reed player who had like 7 horns. He had an EWI, that electronic instrument thing, so we could do like guitar solos and like guitar bends and stuff like that. All this extra kind of MIDI stuff. It was crazy. That was really fun. That was also kind of ran a bunch of different like sort of styles, but it was an opera, like proper, so a ton of music too. It's like a 2-act opera, you know. It was serious.
When you were at Bandstand, did you have time? Was it did you run long enough to actually get subs to come in for you?
I did, yeah. I had two guys come in and sub for me. I had Joe Horchevsky and Dan Berkery, who I'm sure you both know. I know we both know Joe from Avenue Q. And they both like did great. I wish we had more time with the run and I could have gotten more people in. I mean, you know how it is when it comes to the subbing thing. It's always you want to get I'd love to give everybody a chance to sub on a show that I do. I'd love to be blessed with a show that runs long enough that I can have everybody I know sub on it. It would be awesome. But it's tough, and the decision making process is always kind of a mutual thing with you, the player, and the music director, and you just the contract, and you want everybody to be comfortable with like who you're bringing in and stuff. So yeah, I wish we'd had a little more time, but I was able to get two of my buddies in there. They both did great, of course. Yeah, so that was the first time I think I'd ever yeah, Wonderland did not run long enough to get a sub in.
And you weren't able to take off at Jerry Springer, but you went out to do a show called Clueless the Musical.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Was that was an off-Broadway show, correct?
That was also off-Broadway. Yeah, that was at Signature Theater. It was one of those houses. Again, that's the name of it. We were trying to remember earlier. It was one of the Signature Theater houses. Yeah, and that one was again about the same like kind of 6-8 week run. I did have a sub on that one too. Yeah, I had someone sub. We had a family wedding. It was taking place kind of over the Christmas holidays or New Year holiday really. So I had to get away I had a whole weekend I had to get away. So I made sure I had one sub. And so he got that whole weekend I was gone. And then he got a whole bunch of other shows just to help make it make sense. I try to be considerate of those things when I have subs in on stuff,
Out of all the shows that you've done so far, which one is your favorite musical to play?
That's a tough one. I mean, it's like such a hard one to say. I suppose that all the ones I've played, man, I don't even know. They're all just so different, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I mean, Bandstand was really fun and rewarding to play for sure. Like that was a good one. I'd probably have to say Bandstand at this point. I think I had to pick that one. I was a little more, I was a little more experienced at that point. I got to kind of make the book, my own as much as I could. And it was just a really fun, it was a great hang. Everybody was really cool. The charts were great. I had to pick out of the current list right now. I think I'd have to pick Bandstand. Yeah.
And you've done several different shows and you've subbed and you've been the chair holder.
Mm-hmm.
Advice for someone that's listening to this podcast or watching this. What's the most important thing a drummer should know about being a success on Broadway?
About being a success on Broadway. As a sub, it's definitely preparation is just super, super key. Like I was saying before, like when my first couple subbing experiences here, I had the gift of the time I had tons of time to prep for the show and I got to do it really well. Really take my time, get in lots of repetitions, feel super comfortable coming in. Like you get to that point where you're almost like, you should be like tired of playing the show before you play your first show. You know what I mean? And then I've also had the experience where it's like, hey, I need you to learn this show in like a couple weeks or whatever. And it's a ton of notes and it's crazy fast and you really got to like kind of cram. And you might be busy, the more you work, the busier you're going to be. And it's going to be harder to find that time to do, these extended hours of preparation that you have to do. So I've been on both sides of that. And like, you always got to do your best, of course, but like the preparation is definitely key. For me subbing, I have like a whole like system I do with like, I have like a spreadsheet that I sort of color code with like, red, orange, yellow, green numbers, like red ones being like really high priority, and I actually I work on those first, even if it's not the order of the show. I work on like the really hard stuff first so that I get the most time and the most repetitions on those. And then, continue on to like the orange ones, then the yellow, and then the other ones, and you just the easy stuff. You don't have to practice as much. So you try to optimize your time that way, to make that kind of stuff work. Yeah, I think being a success, who was it that said it's not about you? Was that Rodney?
Yes.
Yeah, that was Rodney. That's absolutely true. You have to remember it's definitely like not about it's not about the drums or the drummer or about like whatever. You've got to really kind of have I think kind of like a service mindset in a way. You know what I mean? You've got to kind of really look at it like, okay, how can I make the music director's job easier? How can I like make this better? How do I fit into this huge thing? What's the best way for me to make my part, the best, but fit into what's going on? And just remembering that it's not about you is good. I don't remember if it was on the podcast or if it was just in person, but Warren also was talking about like the empathy you have to have for like the MD and like understanding like is they're trying to push you and pull you and move the show around and make it fit and whatever. Man, it is. I mean, that's a hard gig being a Broadway music director. You know, making a Broadway show is a major undertaking. It is. They are huge organizations and organisms, and there's all kinds of things going on that you'll never know about if you're a pit musician, or even if you're the drummer, because you're kind of around like some of it but not always, and it's just being like having that like kind of yes and like a humble attitude about it, I think is really important.
So Rent, EVITA, Matilda, AVE Q, Cats, Hello Dolly, Anastasia, the Prom, subbing at all those shows.
Yeah.
Your first time subbing, and afterwards, if you're looking at this, I have a pad here. Their musical directors writing stuff down. When I was subbing at a bunch of different shows, I would always be nervous because when I see the musical director writing stuff down, I think, oh my God, she's writing stuff about me. So taking notes. What is your approach to taking notes after your first or second or third time subbing a show?
Yeah. Whoever's giving you the note is always right. You just have to they're for sure right. As I was telling you earlier, I just played my first show at Come From Away yesterday. And I got a couple like little dynamic notes and stuff after the fact. It's great. They're really sweet over there. Everybody really wants everyone to be successful. And so they come from a very like supportive place. But yeah, I mean, the notes, the notes are right. Take the notes. The reason you'll not be asked back at a show is because you're not taking the notes. Probably that could probably one of the chief things that could be a reason why. If you play it a few times and they're like, oh, I don't know, it doesn't seem to be working, that could very well be a reason, so yeah, I'm trying to think what the thing is. I'm similar to I think Sean has talked about this, Sean McDaniel, on the podcast and in life. I don't want to be practicing the show like after my first or second show. You know what I mean? Like that's how well you should know the show, like before you go in. Like you shouldn't need to practice. Now, if there's like a particular passage that's really technical, or like, how it goes with some of our books, there's like a lot of like choreography, as I call it, like the switching sticks to mallets to beater to like whatever. If there's a moment like that you want to go over, that's a different thing. But I mean, as far as like really like shedding and like internalizing it and learning it, that should all be done before your first show. So you shouldn't, hopefully, I mean, it again depends on the timeline, right? If you've got 2 months to prepare, that's different than a week, so it's a different thing. But yeah, I try to learn it so well that I don't have to practice it much. And so most notes, hopefully the notes that you're getting are notes that are related to just internal things about like the balance or being with another instrument in the band or something like that. And those kind of things, if you've prepared appropriately and you're a good enough musician behind the drums, you should be able to do that without like practicing it. If someone says, hey, the cross stick was too loud at the first chorus in that number, you should just be able to write that in your music and just do it differently next time. Like that should be fine. You know what I mean? Hopefully those are the kind of notes that you're getting and not like, oh man, it just doesn't feel right. Like that's the worst, when you get like one of those notes, it's like, oh no, oh man, I don't know. I don't know what to do with that. Like that's tough, Yeah,
that's note that you don't want to get because
you
may not be asked back.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people go down because they think that they have it and they don't have the right feel, or it's not in their wheelhouse. They thought they can do it, but preparation is key. I want to kind of go back to something that we didn't really talk about. A lot of people don't necessarily like this question. Your top 5 favorite drummers of all time.
Oh boy. Sure. Man, top 5.
And why?
Well, I'll start. This can't be in any kind of order because that'll never be in an order for me. I'll start with the one I know is your favorite that you love to hear on every podcast is Steve Gadd. of course, because like it's Steve Gadd. So my first exposure to him was actually I looked it up in preparation for this. I think it was like the April 1998 Modern Drummer or something. He's on the cover. He and Brendan Hill, who from Blues Traveler, was the other guy on the name on the cover, who's also like one of my favorite bands that I listened to all the time when I was in my more younger formative years, and still listen to them. I love them. But they had an article about him, and this is like he's already been playing with like James Taylor and Chick and everybody. I mean, he's already at that point, almost 20 years ago or whatever, super established as like just one of the giants, but they had in the article, I think it was Chick Corea was one of the people, James Taylor was one of the people, and one of like a couple of the big record producers of records that he had played on, talking about him and what they all love about him and his playing. And so much of it was always directed at like, he serves the music. He plays the music. It's not him trying to show off. He's doing this. And then like Chick was talking about like his part writing, like I'm playing something for him at the piano and I can see the wheels turning and he's like writing stuff down and bringing me ideas and we're trying stuff and whatever. And that kind of just really like collaborative spirit and like that, the fact that the people he had worked with would say those kind of things about him, that made a big impression on me. And that really made me want to be that kind of musician, at the drums. I never set out like trying to be like super like choppy and fast and everything. I was never like that kind of player. I don't really think I am that kind of player. I like to play music that like feels good. Segue into the next one. Like, for example, I was thinking about this guy because I get to see him tomorrow at Madison Square Garden with John Mayer, but Steve Ferrone. We're going to go see John Mayer, the Sob Rock tour tomorrow, my wife and I, which I'm psyched about. But Steve Ferrone is in that band this time around. And like, I mean, hearing Steve Ferrone play on Wildflowers for Tom Petty, which is again, like kind of a late 90s, record, just his like really simple parts, immovable pocket, even for, I'm probably weird, but like at 15, 16, whatever I was at that age, I was like, wow, man, that's so amazing. Those great sounds. I mean, but at the same time, I was also like obsessed with Carter Beauford of Dave Matthews Band. He was like a million notes a second, it's totally different. He's got a great groove too, of course, but it's like a very different approach to the instrument. I spent, I think it was 8th grade. So I would be like 14. I got the Under the Table and Drumming DVD or the tape VHS, I think actually VHS. And I spent my whole Christmas break learning to play number 41 on his like open-handed setup with like riding with the left hand and playing the snare with the right, and he's got all that like complicated, like between the hi-hat and the ride business and around the kit thing that he does and whatever. So I spent like my whole break learning to play that and learning to play like the mambo groove that my teacher was trying to teach me, which is one of those like that was my first busy Latin groove I ever learned,
Steve Gadd, Steve Ferrone,
Carter Beauford,
my favorites too. Carter Beauford.
Yeah, I love Steve. I wish I still regret that I never got to see him play with Tom Petty. I wish I'd made time and money or whatever to do that.
Well, I'm gonna be posting something because he's one of my big influences.
Yeah.
On the Broadway Drumming 101 newsletter, talking about some of my influences. But there's some footage of him playing with Shaka Khan in 1981, which I love that era because he was on a lot of records that I grew up listening to back then, and just watching him play those songs and with the same band that recorded a lot of those things back in the day, like Anthony Jackson on bass, and his feel and just his style and some of the cool things he does with the hi-hat. Just perfect to me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
You talking about? We'll get to the other two. I'm sure you have two more. Drummers.
Yeah. Sure. I can probably a couple.
I just thought about this. You grew up playing worship music. I know that there was at a time this thing called gospel chops. Is there worship chops?
Worship chops are like we were talking about. Your ride cymbal has to be super washy, like no articulation, just has to be shh, in the back of the track. I think worship chops, you also have to play like crazy held back, like all the time. Like the time has to be really held back. It's never pushing, You know what I mean? Like those, like the records. I'm thinking of like the Hill songs and like the Chris Tomlin records. It's like they recorded the whole record and then took the drums and went, "We're gonna nudge it back in time, like about 50 milliseconds or something, you know, whatever the number would be." And it's like it's just so like held and like firm and solid and never rushes. You know, I guess that would be like worship chops. You know, if there is such a thing, I have no idea.
Somebody should come up with a DVD. I get ideas.
You do
Worship
tons,
chops,
man.
the DVD or the VHS. Let's bring it back.
Yeah.
So anyway, I digress.
Mhm.
Two other drummers. I'm just curious who
Mhm.
were some of your influences.
Yeah, like I said earlier, Collective Soul, like Shane Evans. He's like those records have always been my favorite. It's almost more about like it's about the band and about the producers, even as much as it is about the drummer. Sometimes I'm realizing as I get older and I realize I look back and think about what did I like about this record or this song or like whatever. I realize so much of it is it's the sound of the drums, which is, you know, often like equal parts both you know, the what you call it, the drummer and the producer, you know. So learning about like that kind of stuff. Yeah, like I love those early Collective Soul records and the way that he plays and the style. Blues Traveler, Brendan Hill. I'm trying to think of who else. I kind of like didn't really study a lot of like drum set stuff when I was in college. You know what I mean? It was kind of a weird like thing. So it was still like I was doing all the symphonic stuff, which is it's kind of a different thing.
You
Mhm.
have two important things behind you, which is the Wonderland poster and the
Right. This is
band.
my little office. I don't know if you can see there's V drums back there in the corner. I don't know if that's like if that's obvious or not. There's like V drums back there. Got the
Ah,
practice pad rig, you know.
so when you have, well, let's go to the next thing I was thinking about is teaching. Do you have
Hmm.
do you do a lot of teaching, and where do you do that?
I haven't done much here recently. I did tons when I was in Texas. When you're in Houston, you know, like every high school, they're all massive. They're all like God, like 1,000 kids or more or something. They're just like these massive schools, and every school has a marching band, and like every school has a band wing with like a full auditorium and like two band halls and a place for the choir and like everything else. It's wild. It's crazy because I think it all stems from like the football program. They have like the football stadium. They need the big marching band that matches the football vibe. So like every like high school in Houston has like a 200 kid marching band, you know, in color guard or whatever. So you've got like you go to Houston and it's like instantly it's like, oh, you're a drummer, great, can you teach? Cool, here's 30 private lessons like instantly everywhere. So you're constantly doing stuff like that. In New York, it's way harder is the thing because it's the drums are loud. You know, it's not the best thing for vertical apartment living. You know, people get annoyed by it pretty easily, and you know, rightfully so, probably. You know, so it's harder to do here. I do have a studio in Midtown where I practice and I can teach there, and I have done some lessons there. It's one of those things I haven't really like pursued it a whole lot, which is, you know, might be to my detriment. But yeah, I do teach. You know, I try to, it's not teaching, I guess, but like the informal, like doing this kind of thing that we're doing with like somebody who's like younger and coming up in the scene or whatever. I've had a few people approach me, be like, "Hey, I'm working on a book. Can I come play it for you?" You know, or like, you know, is that cool? I'm like, yeah, sure, of course. Like, you know, they try to, you know, accommodate stuff like that, you know.
Are you currently working on any shows or any kind of musical things right now? I know you're doing other things outside of music, but is there any kind of
Mhm.
musical thing that you're working on?
Yeah, my next show that's coming up, I'm doing an off-Broadway show called Between the Lines. That's going to be at the Tony Kaiser Theater at Second Stage, you know, right in Midtown. We open like mid-June and now allegedly run into October, you know, fingers crossed if it actually
Good.
goes that long, you know, so a nice, like long off-Broadway run.
That's great.
Yeah. So looking forward to that. We're actually starting the work, like the prep work and the, you know, the pre-working stuff on that like pretty soon here. So that'll start up soon.
That's great.
Yeah. It's a fun show. It's kind of a poppy thing. Greg is Greg Anthony, my go-to, you know, one person who always hire. I'm lucky enough to be hired by occasionally. You know, it's gonna be the book is gonna be like drum set with like vibraphone and bells and some other stuff. And kind of have a it's pretty poppy. A lot of it's fairly poppy stuff. So it's gonna be fun. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun to play. We got a good band assembled and stuff. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
So make sure you bring that crash ride cymbal to have that big wash sound.
Yeah, for sure. Got to have the worship vibe for sure.
Worship chops, bring
Gotta
the
have
worship
it.
chops to Broadway.
Yeah, for sure.
Where can people find you on social media?
They can find me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. I think on Instagram and Twitter, my handle is Adam Wolfe Music. And you can find me I have a website, adamwolfemusic.com. Yeah, that's the easiest place to find me. I'm on Facebook just as myself. I don't have like a player or artist page or whatever it is. You can find me there. Shoot me a message, if you're in the city. I mean, it's one of those things. It's with COVID, it's just such a drag. I know it's so hard to have people like come watch a show and come sit in your setup and stuff. And so maybe, I don't know, this summer, who knows, maybe that'll change. But currently the climate is that everybody is pretty conservative as far as having people who don't really have to be in the building, like in the building. So it's real hard, unfortunately, right now to get people in to like watch stuff, which is too bad because it really is like I said, it really is the greatest thing to be able to like just go in and watch people play these books. And it's just such an education when you're lucky enough to get to sub for someone and you get or make the materials to do so. And you get to go so deep into their playing and how they do what they do in this very particular context that is musical theater, where you're balancing so many things and often things that are like not musical. They're not specific to music. It's you're balancing all these other like issues at the time, and it's really cool to be able to do that. And I'm sad that we don't get to do that as much right now, but hopefully we'll get to a point where we can all like be in the same spaces again, and it's not going to be so regimented about who and when and everything, and we'll be able to do that.
I don't know. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about the real estate thing?
Sure. I actually find it like I was saying, it actually really, to me, it's very it's all part of the same thing, and it's all part of life, and it's all part of the overall deal. I think, if you look, it says like LCMYCDO. I didn't turn that off. I probably should turn that off. That's the name of my wife's real estate team, and it's DO because I'm director of operations on the team. Is the closest. That's a very fancy title for saying I do high level admin work and kind of the utility player at this point. I kind of do whatever needs to be done if it's a showing or whatever's got to happen. But no, so over the pandemic, so I was telling you previously, like my wife has been a real estate agent here in New York City for 7 or 8 years now. We got married about 3 years ago, and I got my real estate license in mid 2019 because I was coming out of a spate of, learning a lot of shows and subbing on some stuff. And I'd kind of reached that point where I wasn't busy with prep anymore. And I just, it became clear that like she was really busy. And it was like, well, if I could get my license, then I could, help out with easy stuff. So we did that. And then lo and behold, a few months later, like the whole Broadway world shut down, and I was suddenly had like all this time on my hands. So we decided to have me kind of like join the team like full time, basically, for a lot of that pandemic shutdown period, which was great for us in terms of the real estate thing. It really freed her up to do more. We had a really fabulous year last year, 2021. Was her best year in the business ever. And we're growing our team. We're hiring new agents onto the team and stuff like pretty routinely right now. And so overall it's been great. And I think it was one of those things where during the pandemic, I mean, a lot of us had to do things other than music, to keep ourselves busy and keep ourselves, afloat and everything. And I just think I consider myself very fortunate that I even had it to go into, because it was really not a good time, or a very difficult time, I should say, to be starting a real estate business like during the pandemic or something. But thankfully, my wife already had an established business that she'd been working on for like I said, a number of years. So me coming on and being sort of extra labor for her was really just gas on the fire that she already had going. And we were able to kind of blow it up like fairly quickly. So hopefully we can continue that. To be honest, I'm not sure I really want to like ever stop it, to be honest. Like, even if like I said, I have an off-Broadway show coming up, I'm going to be there a lot, and going to be playing a lot of shows a week. And like, that's what it's going to be. But I'm still going to be doing the real estate stuff, I think, in my off time. I think it's really, I've enjoyed using a different part of my brain, than just like hammering away at the same, music thing all the time. Although I do love doing that too. I've learned that my mind seems to like thrive on like some variety in this way. Like I said, I just did my first show at Come From Away, like doing all that prep and getting to do that and go to the studio and shed, like, felt really good. It's a break from the other thing I'd been doing so much. You know what I mean? So having that variety, I think, is really good. And I don't think we should, I don't think it should be a requirement to like be a musician that you're like just full time, like all the time, you know, necessarily. Although I get where people are coming from. What it's like, I think it's who is it? It's like I feel like it's like the Tommy Igo or somebody has a thing about like if you can do anything else, if you can see yourself doing anything else, do it. Otherwise, don't do a career in music or something. You know what I mean? Like that's one of those. Like I hope I'm not misquoting it. And it isn't him. I'm sure that's probably multiple people. I would imagine have something like that. But it's true. Like a music career is very difficult. You know, like I was saying, even with the orchestras, like, you know, you win a full-time job in a symphony orchestra and then your orchestra might fold, or like we still see, you know, really unfair labor things happening with orchestras. They just decide they want to renegotiate and they want to start paying you half and they want to cut your benefits and whatever. And it's like these things happen there too. So yeah, I mean, I think like diversifying some things and just having, you know, multiple things going on in your life is not a bad thing necessarily. You know, I mean, God bless if you can find a way to do music full time and if you consider the diversification of that being like teaching and producing and like whatever else, like great, like more power to you for sure. For me, it's been very good for like me and for my family to like have the, to have me doing some of the real estate stuff too. And I enjoy it for the most part. There's parts I don't like, of course, there's always parts to any job that are like a little bit of a drag, but you know, most of it I really enjoy. And it's been good. And at this point, I'm fortunate too. Like our team is getting big enough that like my role is evolving into, I'm not really like agenting as much, meaning like I'm not really like showing property as much or doing stuff where it's like it's got to be a really specific time on the calendar. So we're trying to transition to me more to doing like kind of bigger picture supervising things within the business that like need to get done, but they're like project based. It just has to get done. It doesn't have to be done on Tuesday at 4:00 or whatever. You know what I mean? So that fits into the music schedule like way better. Cause that means if I'm doing a reading or if I'm doing tech or I'm doing whatever, I just got to get the stuff done in my off time, you know? And it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to give up like, oh, I would do the reading, but I can't, you know, I can't be there on Saturdays ever. You know, that doesn't work for like the music thing. You got to be able to commit to the whole gig when it's a lot of the gigs, you know, it kind of requires that.
So what's the name of the company again?
We are the LCMYC team at Keller Williams, New York City. LC for my wife, Laura Cook.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, she's the brains of the outfit for sure. She is she's the team like leader kind of thing. Like she's really fabulous and is a very, very good good agent and stuff. I'm very lucky just to be able to you know, that she's so good at it and be able to like come along and kind of support her has been like a good thing for us for sure. Yeah.
LC/NYC.
Mm-hmm. LCMYC real estate team.
AdamWolfemusic.com.
Mm-hmm.
BroadwayDrumming101.com.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. And
my pleasure.
It's so nice to talk to you. And
thanks for having me.
And
I was gonna say, when is someone gonna like interview you? Like there's little like tidbits of you in all these like interviews. That's great, but when are we gonna get someone who's gonna interview you?
That's a good question.
We should do that. I know I bet you've got lots of great insight and stories and
you know,
everything. You should do a split screen thing. You just do like, you know, just put on a green shirt and a red shirt.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about? Maybe that's you know, another idea.
There you go.
Anyway, you have a great day, and we will definitely talk soon. And I'm looking forward to possibly seeing your show down the road. And I hope
thanks, man.
Hope it gets extended and goes to Broadway. And you
thank you.
$3 million, and you can retire from Broadway and do this on the side.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk soon, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
I'll talk to you later.